You will never quite shoot videos the same way after watching this. The things I will be telling you about in this video aren't the traditional tips and tricks that you hear just about everywhere else. Other than learning the technical aspects of a camera, these things have been a game changer for my career as a filmmaker and a videographer and also a photographer to some extent. I'll synthesize about 12 years of video making and filmmaking into about a few points that will level up just the way you approach filming videos. So all of these things I'll be talking about are things that I wish that I learned as soon as I started my video career. And the last one here is one thing that I wish I had learned right in the very beginning. It was not until about 5 years into my filmmaking and videography career that I finally was able to grasp this last one and fully understand it to implement it into my video creation. It has definitely been a game changer for me. So the first one is get to know your lenses. It's important that you understand your different focal lengths, and by that I do not just mean just knowing that the smaller the number, the wider the angle of view that you're going to get, and that the bigger the number, the more close up or more tight you're going to get to your subject. It's much more than that. The type of lens that you use also tells a bit of a story. The use of a particular lens or a particular focal length is very intentional. So for example, right now I'm shooting at a focal length of about 24 mil, and this is a little bit on the wider side, and it makes you feel like you're right here with me, and then we're just chatting about face to face. You're about an arm's length from me, and it feels a little bit cozier and it feels a little closer. So if we were in a huddle here in a sports team before a game, I would use a wider focal length as well, just to make you feel like you're right here with us before the game starts. Filming with a longer focal length, like a 50, or in this case, a 75 mil, even though this is the exact same scene, we don't get that closeness anymore. It's like we're just passing by across the street and we're not really friends.
He's a stranger.
So this is one of the effects that you can get using different focal lengths. You're able now to see all my mesh here, and another reason why you want to distance yourself from me.
He's a stranger.
So once you understand the relationship, the focal length, and the impact it can have to your story, that's going to change your video game. The next thing is understanding your aperture. And by that, I really mean know when to really use a shallow depth of field when you get a very blurry background, or when to use a narrow depth of field when most things in your scene are in focus. So with a smaller f-stop number, you get a larger aperture, and that just creates a more blurry background as the depth of field is quite narrow. And just focus, in this case, in your subject. So it's important to know when to use a shallow depth of field and when to use a wider depth of field. I certainly did this a lot in my earlier days filming weddings. Most of the stuff that I shot was in a wider aperture, making backgrounds just disappear out of focus all the time. But as soon as I embrace, for example, a narrower aperture like an f8, f11, I was able to get more things in the frame and focus a lot more on the composition of those shots. With a higher aperture, you have to focus more on your composition, maybe your symmetry, your leading lines, and just what's in your scene. If you're also just filming somebody with a really cool background, you also don't want to shoot with a blurry background because you won't be able to showcase that background either. This is at f2.8, and you can see some blur in my background. And let's increase this. And now I'm at f8. You can definitely see more of my background. And if this was a very popular spot and I wanted to showcase more of my background, you definitely want to ease it up when it comes to that aperture, and you probably want to bring that number higher and close down that aperture so you can get more of your background a little bit more defocused. Another cool thing about closing down that aperture is that you can get very cool silhouette effects, especially with a backlit environment. And there's just something about having everything in focus with a good composition. It just looks so good. So there are a couple more things that I want to talk about before I go into the last one, which has been a complete game changer for me. So the next thing you really have to do is understand your picture profiles in your camera. When you get your first camera, it's very tempting to just shoot in auto and video as the camera is straight out of the box. But it's very useful to understand whether your camera can shoot in a flat picture profile or in a log profile. Shooting in these sort of profiles, you're going to be able to get the most out of your camera's capabilities by shooting in these profiles. Video shot in log in the beginning looks like it's completely desaturated and that there is no contrast or color to them. But the thing is that your camera is actually retaining more information from whatever it's capturing in that scene. So you can bring back out all of that data, information, and colors when you do your color correction and color grading when you're editing your clip. And this is going to level up your video footage and put you in the level above the regular video shooters. One caveat though, well, not a caveat, but one thing that you do have to learn when shooting in a log picture profile is that you have to nail that exposure. Instead of making sure that you have proper exposure on your camera by looking at that meter and having that close to 0, you're going to have to expose to the right, meaning overexposing a tiny bit. In the Sony S-Log3 picture profile, I generally expose about plus 1.3 to plus 2.0 on my meter. If you want to find out more about how to properly expose on your Sony camera, I've made a couple more videos that will teach you just that. Link in the description below. The next thing is coverage. What I mean by that is when you approach a scene, for example, somebody baking a cake, you want to get clips from as many angles as possible and different types of shots as well. For example, different types of wide, medium, and tight shots. So think of your scene as a puzzle that you're trying to build. Each individual piece of that puzzle is a single shot. Every shot is going to be different, but also similar at the same time, so that when you come back in the edit, when you put all of the pieces of the puzzle together, you'll be able to have a finished video sequence with a variety of shots that just looks really good. And this brings me to this last thing that has been a game changer for me. And this is to embrace the dark side. This one is a little bit more complex, but for example, take this shot. It is well lit and properly exposed. I have a window right in front of me and it's giving me overall nice lighting on me all throughout. But to level this up, you're going to need to bring this. This is a negative fill, or a neg for short, and what this does is that it sucks away the light in your scene. Not all of it, but a portion of it, depending on how big or small your fill is and how close it is to the subject and what you want to shoot. So focus on me. Overall, pretty natural, even lighting. As soon as I bring this in, I cut down more of that light and I start to create more shadow in my scene. And depending how I shift it and how I move it, I'm able to target that light a little bit more and then just create a little bit more shadow on this side. It creates a little bit more contrast in your scene. Or we can even do it here on this side as well. And in my opinion, when you add more contrast, you make a shot look more dynamic and just more cinematic as well. And this has something to do with something called lighting ratio. Lighting contrast ratio is the relationship of the intensities of the different lights in your scene. Primarily the key light, your main light, and your fill light, the one that fills in from the other side. So the higher that lighting ratio, the more contrast you're going to have. So let's go back to this shot. Right in front of the window, I get about a 1:1 lighting contrast ratio. So a 1:1 lighting ratio is equal lighting where everything just looks the same. And although it's okay, it just looks a little bit flat. A 2:1 lighting contrast ratio is when the key light is double the intensity of the fill light. And this is a typical lighting situation when you are filming interviews. In a 4:1, the key light is 4 times as bright as the fill light, making things even more contrasty, more punchy, and just more dramatic overall. The type of ratio that you use is going to be depending on what you want to design for your scene and the mood and the vibe that you want to give. But understanding this concept is going to make your lighting more intentional when you're setting up your scene and when you're filming videos. And you don't always need a professional light meter to make sure that your light is exactly 2 times or 4 times the strength or the intensity of this other light. You can just look at your scene to determine what the relationship looks like between the brighter parts in your scene and the darker parts of your scene. And moving your lighting around, bringing in negative fills and different things like that is going to let you play around with that lighting. And so anyways, that is it for today's video. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that now you're able to take your video filming game just a step higher. If you're still here, here are a couple more videos you could watch next, and I'll see you there. And if you haven't subscribed, now would be the time to do it. See you then.